Okay. I do not miss Zooming for the class. Okay. So first off, this is a little wonky, but that's okay. I'm just going to do a little intro to myself. Some of you know me, some of you don't. So just for a little bit of background, I went to Georgia, go Dogs. That was an awesome game. Did anyone watch it? Couple, okay. I was up way later than I should have been. So if I start not making sense, it's because I'm really tired. I usually go to bed at like 9:30. Yeah, so I'm Dr. McDaniel. Email is the best way to reach me. You can reach me through Canvas. My office is just across the building, 215. If you want to come by, I'll show you my office hours and where to find them in just a second. But yeah, I got my PhD from Georgia. And I actually studied entomology. So, whoops. Hang on. Come on. Here we go. Okay. So my background's in bugs. It was kind of a winding road for how I got into the ecology of insects. I would never have guessed it when I was in high school. I hated bugs, but now I have a PhD in them. I basically love being outside. I love understanding how nature kind of works and different impacts that we as humans have on nature, essentially. So I looked at how dams are affecting rivers and wetlands and floodplains, and basically used aquatic beetles as a bioindicator to understand that a little bit better. I'll talk about that probably as we get into some of the population ecology stuff. I've mostly, since I've been here, so I've been here a year and a half now teaching at Piedmont. I taught in New York before that, and I taught in an environmental science program up there. So here I've been teaching A&P and biology. So I'm kind of in like not ecology mode. This is the first time I'm teaching ecology here. I taught it for 3 semesters, 3 years up in New York. It's a little bit of a switch. So yeah, anyway, I teach A&P, I teach biology, and then ecology right now. So I'm excited to be teaching this course, basically. This is what I love, and hopefully, I know some of you guys are, you're taking it for your major, and maybe you're not that interested in ecology, but hopefully by the end of this, you'll appreciate it. Okay, so that's my academic background. I also have a 2-year-old son, a tiny little dog, and a husband. So I really try to get back to you guys quickly if you email me. I'm just saying this mostly because on the weekends, I just like to spend time with my family, and I don't really respond on the weekend. So if we have something coming up Monday, I might not get back to you till I get here at 9 a.m. On a Monday. But anyway, that's me in a nutshell. So yeah, now I want to learn a little bit about you guys. So it kind of helps me get to know you a little bit better if I ask you just a few questions, and I like to sort of tailor my upper level courses to what people are, what helps them learn the most, I guess. So one of the major questions on here, one of my favorite ones, is what are you excited to learn about in this class? If you're not excited about anything, don't tell me that. Figure something out. And the types of activities we prefer, like just what helps you learn. A lot of my classes are really lecture heavy, but I try to incorporate some other activities as you want, if I can. So stuff that you like. If you just like lectures, that's fine. You can just circle lectures. I like to mix it up a little bit and figure out what really works for people. So take a few minutes, fill that out. If you don't know really what to expect from an ecology class, so that second question, what are you excited about to learn about? Just put something that you think is involved in ecology. It's not, I mean, this obviously isn't graded. Is everybody pretty much done? Keep writing if you want to. I'll come in and collect those that are done. Keep going. Okay, so just kind of looking through these class discussions, group work, presentation projects. Cool. Okay, like that. Q&A sessions. I like to do reviews. I'm hoping we can squeeze some in. I usually like to squeeze in a review before an exam, and I'll talk about those in a minute. Group work. Okay. Awesome. Sweet. Okay, class discussions. All right, awesome. So I'm going to try to mix in some other stuff other than just lectures. I mean, it's, you know, any science class is pretty heavy on the lecture side, but I'll keep those in mind. And as we get a little bit further down the road, we can incorporate some of this stuff. So that's awesome. Directions. You guys kind of have an idea of what ecology is, so that's awesome. Nice. Okay. So general ideas of what ecology is good. So we're going to get into that today. All right. Thank you. Okay. Thank you guys for that. Now on to some syllabus stuff, just some basics about the course. Okay. All right. So syllabus, I do everything through Canvas. I know professors do things differently, but I like having everything on Canvas. The schedule, the syllabus, stuff that gets turned in, I have you turn it in on Canvas. I put all the assignment due dates on Canvas. I think it just helps everyone be on the same page. So definitely check Canvas often. I use it heavily. My contact info is on there. I'll kind of show you how I've set Canvas up so you know where to find stuff if you need to find it. How you're graded is going to be important, obviously. So I'll go over where your grade is coming from. And then class policies, I'll talk about some attendance stuff. And then the course schedule, which I'll try to stick to as much as possible. Finally, lab. We obviously didn't have lab yesterday. We don't have lab on Monday next week because it's MLK Day. So we'll have lab for the first time on January 24th, and I'll talk a little bit about that too. So let's head to Canvas. So for those of you on Zoom, I am just going to let you see the screen. You can follow along on your computer if you want to, but rather than having to do this both ways, I'll stop sharing and you can hopefully see most of what I'm talking about here. Okay. All right, ecology. Student responsibility agreement, fill that out by Friday and you will get 1 bonus point on your first exam. So make sure you do that by Friday. I'll remind you on Thursday again. A lot of people have already done it for their other classes, so just go through and do it for every single class. You basically just have to check a box and say you read something. You guys have done that before. So fill that out, you get a bonus point. Next, let's see. So lecture schedule. So I have this kind of general course info. I might be adding to it throughout the semester. Lecture schedule, lab schedule is up here. If they change, I'll update them. The Zoom link here will be active all semester. So if for some reason, like I said, if you have to quarantine or you're sick or you just can't be here, whether it's excused or unexcused, I don't mind. I can still Zoom you in. If it's not a valid reason for not being here, I'll mark you as absent, but you can still join via Zoom if you want to. So this will be, if you ever have to be out, let me know. And just remember the Zoom link is right here. It'll be there for you. Down here, I'll have all of the PowerPoints. So all the PowerPoints I go over and any worksheets I'll put up here in the module area. If you have to turn in the worksheets, they'll also be under assignments. So sometimes I duplicate where I put them just so I know everyone can find them. I will have the PowerPoints up here at least 12 hours ahead of time. So by the night before our class, this will be up here. You can print them out ahead of time if you want. You can use your computer in here. I don't care how you take notes or how you follow along. It's totally up to you. I think by this point in your academic career, you probably figured that out. Yeah, we'll get into that in a minute. Let's go to, oh yeah, so lecture schedule. I'll just show you kind of the general idea. This is what's worked for me in the past. If I get behind, I've added in a couple of TBA days. So those plan on being here those days. Those are just like catch-up days, or if we have to move stuff back or something. There are 4 exams. I have them listed on here already. You'll take them in person. The final exam is not cumulative. I've kind of gone away from cumulative exams where I can, just because I think they're kind of stressful, and I'd rather you really focus on this final unit of material rather than all of the previous stuff as well. Talk about exams as we get closer to the first one. That's still a ways off. Okay. That is lecture. Lab, a little bit more up in the air. I'm trying to figure out what's going to work, but I pretty much have it outlined here for the semester. The Daniel 305 location, so we'll be meeting there for our first lab. It's a computer lab. So essentially, half of the labs will be sort of statistics and Excel based, so you'll be doing data analysis, and then half of them will be outside data collection. I'll talk more about the lab when we meet this first lab day, because we're not going outside. But Daniel 305 will be the computer lab we meet in. Otherwise, we're in Stewart 318 and the field. So meet in Stewart 318, and then we'll go outside somewhere to collect data. You can see what the points, kind of where all that comes from, and I'll show you the syllabus as to how much lab is actually worth. All right, yeah, and I'll talk more about that, like I said, when we meet for lab. How many people have experience with Excel, just in general? Okay, a little bit. All right. I don't want to bore you guys the first lab, but it's good to have everyone on the same page as to how to make graphs, how to do t-tests, how to do some basic statistics in Excel. So that's what we're going to start with on the 24th. Syllabus. Let's go there. You can download it if you want to. I'm not going to go through all of this. You know where we're meeting, you know when we're meeting. Our labs are on Mondays. It's set for 3 hours. I don't expect it to take 3 hours, especially not when we're in the computer lab. But that's mostly just for travel time. If we have to travel somewhere, I'm mostly sticking, you know, around Demarest, Cornelia for our field labs. So sometimes it might go to 3 hours, but most of the time I'm hoping to get it done in about 2, just for a heads up. Yes, blah, blah, blah. 4 credit hours. Here's my contact info, office hours. They're all right here. So I have an office hour at least one every day, except for Friday. I'm in my office many other times as well, so feel free to drop by. If it's not during office hours, I'll probably still be there. Yes, the textbook, it is optional. So I sent out a message, an announcement on Canvas. You don't have to get it if you are continuing on in ecology. I think this is a really good ecology textbook. It's one that I've used for a long time. The edition doesn't really matter. You can get an older edition. I think I use an older edition, but it has good information in it. If it helps you to read textbooks outside of class, definitely go ahead and purchase it. They might have an electronic option. I don't know. But all the information for the exams will be in the PowerPoints. The PowerPoints aren't complete, so there are some blanks where you'll have to actually pay attention and fill in some information. But everything that I'll put on the exam will be in the PowerPoint in one form or another. You don't have to go to the book, obviously, because it's optional. You don't have to read the textbook for any of the exams if you don't want to. Okay. I know a lot of people in here aren't necessarily going into something ecological, so I don't want to force you to buy an ecology textbook. Okay, grading. Pretty simple. I like keeping the grade breakdown simple. Exams are 60%. The lab, essentially, everything in the lab is 30%. Sometimes you'll have a longer report. Sometimes you'll just have a simple kind of worksheet making some graphs. Altogether, that's going to total to 30%. And then miscellaneous is just stuff I throw out there, you know, in class, like in-class assignments, discussions, stuff like that. That'll add up to 10%. For lecture exams, non-cumulative final. You can't make a lecture exam, obviously, you know me. Any assignments, so this mostly goes for lab and miscellaneous assignments. If they're late, you can still turn them in, but it's a 25% deduction. Attendance. So this is, if you've been in one of my classes before, I think I've used this every semester, but the first semester I've been here. If you don't miss any classes, you get a 1% bonus added to your overall grade. So if you have an 89.2, that's not going to round up to an A, right? If you haven't missed any classes, you get a 1% bonus and you get a 90.2. So you do get an A. If you only miss one class, you get a 0.5% bonus, which again, if you had an 89.2, that would bump you up to an 89.7, and that would round up to an A. So you don't know if you need this until the very end. It's only if you're on the cusp that it really comes into play. Usually every semester I have 2 or 3 students who really benefit from that if they haven't missed any classes or only missed one class. So rather than deducting points for you not being here, I like to just encourage you to be here, and you get a bonus for actually being in class. That's the only attendance aspect that I have. If you're not in class a lot, you're going to be missing out on a lot of material and your grade will probably suffer anyway. But yeah, that's just it's a little bonus in case you make it to every class. And that doesn't include excused absences. So if it's excused and you're sick or you have a sporting event, it doesn't count against you. Okay, so if you are sick once and you have a doctor's note, you still get that 1% bonus if you can't be here. Does that make sense? Lab. I'll talk more about lab. We're not going outside the first week, which is good, but do be prepared to go outside any week. So we're going to be outside. If it's pouring down rain or thundering, obviously, we'll make alternate arrangements. But if it's cold, if it's hot, it won't be that hot probably by maybe by like the end of April, it might be. We're going to get outside. You're probably going to get dirty. Don't wear flip-flops. Don't wear, I think I put heels. I don't think anyone wears heels. Don't wear heels to lab. We're going to be outside. We're going to be walking around in the woods, possibly in some water. I'll let you know if we're going to be in the water at all. We have some boots you can borrow. There's bugs, there's poison ivy, there's other stuff. So I would suggest not shorts. I don't really like wearing shorts in the field because I don't like thorns mostly. They're painful, so no shorts. You can wear them if you want, but I would suggest no shorts, closed-toed shoes, something you don't mind getting dirty. Other than that, it's kind of up to you. Yes? Crocs? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, those are mostly closed-toed. Yeah. They'll protect your feet. Sometimes I wear like Chacos or something in the field if I know it's not going to be bad, but yes, that's fine. You can wear flip-flops if you want to. I just don't suggest it. I'm not going to like kick you out. So yeah, if you want to wear Crocs, that's totally fine. Okay, yeah, and if you have any allergies to like stinging insects, please let me know. If you need to bring an EpiPen, do that. I guess in the spring, yellow jackets won't really quite be an issue yet. They're mostly in the summer and fall, but there could be ants and other bees as well. All right, and it might be uncomfortable, but being uncomfortable sometimes is a good thing. It makes you appreciate the comforts. That's what I always think of. Okay, participate, all of this, blah, blah, blah. You can read through that if you want to. And then I've already put all the exams in here, so they should be showing up on your calendar. Again, they're in person, so it's not like you're going to turn anything in, but I think that's helpful for people to have a calendar of all the stuff that's due. Okay, questions about the course, the setup of the course, the grading, labs, anything? Okay. I'll keep everything up to date as much as possible on Canvas, especially the schedule. I function well with the schedule. I need a schedule, so I will definitely keep that up to date and try to stick to the schedule. I think that helps people. Okay. I don't think I have any assignments in here really yet, just the exams. Okay, perfect. All right, so that's Canvas. That's how it's set up. Pretty straightforward. A little bit more about lab. Right. Okay. So yeah, lab Monday, 2:30 to 5:30. The lab is really, so the lecture is obviously about the theories and the ideas. Lab is about applying those and quantitatively analyzing them. So if you are scared of statistics, we're gonna kind of just move in slowly. I'm gonna try to explain statistics in a way that makes it clear as to why we use statistics. I think that's the biggest thing that, I don't know, when I was in school, it just kind of got brushed over. It's really important to use statistics to actually analyze the experiments that you've done. I think a lot of you have done research already, so hopefully you understand the benefit of that. So we're going to collect data in the field and we're going to analyze it. Like I said, it'll kind of be field lab, analysis lab, field lab, analysis lab. So we'll kind of alternate that way. So we can do the analysis together. Otherwise, it can be a little scary and overwhelming. So we'll do the analysis as a class. You'll be going through it and working on it yourself and then writing it up. I think I said all this. Oh yeah, you can bring your own computer. If you prefer working on your own computer to the computer lab, that's totally fine. But I don't want to require people to do that. So that's why I set us up in the computer lab for those analysis weeks. And the labs are fun. So the lab, I don't know, I always think lab is the funnest part of ecology. A, you have to go outside. B, you don't have to sit in here and listen to me talk more. And you can apply kind of what you're learning. So be interactive, ask questions. If I don't know the answer, I'll find it out for you. That goes for lecture too. I won't know all of the answers to all of your questions, but I'll find it out. I'll find out the answer if I don't know it. Okay. A little bit more about the course. It is math-based. I know math scares some people. We're going to be using mathematical models, especially in population ecology. It's nothing too complicated. I like to break math down to the simplest level possible. So it's not going to be overwhelming, but do expect a little bit of math in here. Nothing calculus based. I'll kind of mention some differential stuff, but we'll do just the arithmetic version of it. So keep it simple. I really want you guys to understand why we're applying these mathematical models. They can tell us a lot about the world around us. And I don't want you to be just scared away because it's calculus. We're not gonna do that. Statistics we will be using, but again, we're gonna start easy and I'll explain why we use certain tests. And there won't be any statistics on like exams or anything. You'll mostly just be writing them up in your lab reports. Excel, yep, first lab, we're doing Excel. We're gonna get everyone on the same page. So we all know how to use Excel, manipulate data, enter data, manipulate data, use statistics, and then make graphs, charts, some kind of image of that data. Okay.
Is there like a book we have to buy for the lab or something?
Oh, no. Yep. Good question. No lab manual. I'm just going to write up the labs and I'll post them on Canvas. So you'll have them available to you. And I might actually print them out for you. Since there's only 12 of you, I'll probably print them out if we actually need them in the field. Good question. No lab manual. It's my own lab manual, I guess. Okay, guidelines for success. Come to class. Duh. Okay. Please ask questions. I get really tired of talking. I get really tired of talking, period. But I also don't know if you guys are understanding what I'm saying if you're not asking questions. I know it can be intimidating to ask questions. This is a nice small class and you guys are further along. You're not freshmen. So hopefully you're a little bit more comfortable. I like questions. Like I said, I'm not going to know the answers to all of your questions, but I kind of like that too, because then I get to go look up the answer and figure it out and I'll bring it back to you. So ask when something isn't clear. If I'm not explaining something well, I don't know that I'm not explaining it well because it makes sense to me. So please ask. Take notes. Not all of the, I said all the material will be on the PowerPoints, but like I said, there'll be some blanks. So that's mostly to get you guys to still focus on what I'm saying and not just totally zone out knowing that everything is on the PowerPoint. So like for definitions, a lot of times I'll have the word, but then a blank. So you'll have to kind of take notes on what the actual definition is. Don't just rewrite everything that's on the PowerPoint slides. That's why I put them on Canvas. I know some people do that for one reason or another, but I'll probably be going through the slides faster than you can write all the information down. So try not to just copy what's already on the slide and available to you. Review your notes after each class. I know I say this in every class and people probably roll their eyes, but it's helpful to at least look at them maybe once a week. Look at what we did, even if you haven't memorized it, it's fine. Yeah, at the end of, I think pretty much every lecture, I have terms and key concepts that you'll need to know. So it's kind of like a mini review for each of those chapters. So most of the lectures are like one chapter at a time. And I like to put the terms and concepts that you should definitely be familiar with when it comes to test time at the end of those. And then, yeah, ask me questions, stop by my office, email me with anything. If you need help with assignments, more general concepts, statistics, anything, please ask. Questions about any of that? Oh, questions? We're good, right? Okay. All right. That's all about the course. So if you have questions moving forward, please ask. Now we're going to jump into basically the very intro material for the course, starting with what is ecology. I think based on some of the answers I saw in here, what you're excited to learn about, you guys kind of have an idea of what ecology is. Whether specific or general. So does anyone have an idea of what a definition for ecology would be if you had to define ecology? I saw a word in a lot of your answers here that will come up over and over. That starts with an I.
Interaction.
Interactions. So we're talking a lot about interactions. Ecology is the study of interactions, basically. Not interactions between people, not interactions just with the physical environment, but the combination of interactions between organisms and their environment. So the beginning of this course is really going to be focused on the physical environment, climate, not organisms. Once we get into the next couple of units, units 2 and 3, we'll get into talking about organisms. We'll talk a little bit about ecology and evolution in this first unit as well. But first off, talk about the physical environment. The physical environment determines what organisms can live where. If an organism can't live in a really cold environment, it is not going to live in a polar desert. So we're talking about the abiotic or non-living side of things. And then we are also going to talk about, interactions between organisms themselves. So it's not just organisms in the environment, it's organisms in the environment as well as organisms plus organisms. So we'll talk a lot about obviously the biotic side of things. So abiotic and biotic are both going to come into play. How much sunlight is there? That's going to determine what plants can grow in a certain area. But also competition between plants. So one plant species might outcompete another plant species. That's going to be interactions between organisms. So we're going to cover both of these. A little history. I don't go into history much in science courses, but I like to at least give a little history of where ecology came from. Typically, we think of ecology as a young science. It's not really that young because the concepts have been used for a really long time. But you think of ecology as kind of coming about, I don't know, I would say like the 1950s, 60s, when there was kind of more of a focus on the environment and the health of our environment. But really for many, many centuries, people have been trying to understand how organisms interact with each other in their environment from a hunter-gatherer perspective, figuring out where the animals are going and when, figuring out when certain plants are flowering and fruiting to actually be able to survive. So the idea has been around for a long time and people have been studying it for a long time. Theophrastus was one of the first people in the 4th century BC to actually write anything about this, but he talked about the interrelationships between animals and their environment. So it's been around a long time. A formal science, I would say probably mid 1800s is when it sort of became more of a formalized science, and then really caught on mid 20th century. Ecology, the term was coined by Haeckel in the mid 1800s, in 1866. So that's Haeckel. If you break it down, oikos means house or environment. So that's where eco comes from, oikos, so this is Greek. Everyone knows what ology is, right? What's ology?
Study of.
Study of. So logia is the study of. So we're studying the house, studying where organisms actually live. So there's journals. There's a journal that I know of called Oikos that publishes ecology papers. You don't have to write all of that down, but I think this is a nice quote from Haeckel. In 1870, after he coined that term ecology. So when he was defining it, he kind of went into a little bit more detail and said that ecology is really the economy of nature. So it's weird to think about. So this term we'll see a few other times in this course, the economy of nature, which sounds weird. The idea is there's always trade-offs. So a trade-off that one organism makes for more food might result in a less ideal living environment or something. So that's the idea behind an economy. So they're paying for a benefit in one area with a lower, less ideal situation in another area of their living situation. That's the idea behind the economy of nature. So he's the guy who came up with both ecology and the economy of nature. And the economy of nature will come up again in just a little bit, but that's sort of his overall definition of the term that he came up with. I think that's all I have on, well, like people history. I do want to talk about a couple of different sides of ecology as it's evolved over time, since it's been around in the mid 1800s. There's kind of a more historic view, sort of how it started out, but now contemporarily it's changed a bit. So I want to talk about both of those sides of ecology. They both have pros and cons. We'll talk about those pros and cons. So historically, typically people thought of, and you probably heard this, environments as being stable. They're stable natural systems. They are in this perfect equilibrium that doesn't change, right? That's sort of the historic view of ecology. If there's a natural disturbance, they'll bounce back to that happy equilibrium. That's the historic view. That also comes along with each species playing a very specific important role. If you take that species out, it might all collapse. So each and every species has an important role in creating that stability in the environment. Typically, these studies were done from a descriptive point of view. So there's descriptive and manipulative. I'll talk about those here and then in more detail when we get into sort of the scientific method. But by descriptive, I mean, you just go out and see what's happening. You don't manipulate anything. You don't manipulate how much water a plant's getting or a fertilizer or how much dissolved oxygen there is for a fish in the water. You just go out and you look at what's happening and you describe what you see. There's definitely benefits to that, but this is definitely not how most of ecology is done today. So theories aren't tested. You're just observing, which is great. That's kind of why I liked ecology in the first place. On the other side, the contemporary view, now we actually see natural systems as constantly in flux. So they're always changing. There's not this happy equilibrium that historically people thought there were. And disturbances can totally alter an ecosystem permanently. So it doesn't go back to that happy median. It's forever changed. Not all the time. Sometimes you can go back to what it was beforehand, depending on the disturbance. But a huge fire might completely change the plant community that exists in an area. And that plant community might never go back to what it was pre-fire. So stable versus in flux, that's the big difference there. And now we can see that a lot of species can be replaced by other species that have similar functions in an ecosystem. That's not always the case, obviously. Oh, sorry. But just because we lose one species, it doesn't mean the whole ecosystem is going to collapse, right? They can be replaced. There are redundant functions of organisms in ecosystems. And now the focus is on hypothesis testing. Hypothesis testing is what you guys are probably familiar with from other science courses. You make an observation, you come up with a hypothesis, and you test that very specific hypothesis. You don't just go out and observe a river and what's in it and what they're doing. You have a question that you test, and then you ideally analyze it with statistics, and you come up with a conclusion. Ecology is increasingly quantitative. So it used to be very descriptive, like I said, go out and observe what's happening. Now statistics are key. So if you want to go into anything, well, really anything in science, now it's very quantitative in order to support or reject hypotheses. So that's sort of where we move from, and this is where we're at now in ecology, in a very general sense. Okay. So environmental science. Who's an environmental science major? We have environmental science majors in here, right? Yeah. Everyone else I think is biology. So ecology is not environmental science. Environmental science is a lot more broad. I think a lot of, probably not you guys, but a lot of people outside of the sciences would equate these. So they would think ecology is the same as environmental science. It's actually not. So environmental science includes ecology. So ecology is kind of one little piece of the overall environmental science umbrella, if you want to think of it that way. Environmental science is really a cross between, you have the natural science, so that could be forestry, ecology, geology, and then a lot of social science, political science, a lot of other aspects of interactions between organisms and the environment, and a huge focus on anthropogenic impacts in environmental science. More and more so in ecology as well. That's my research focused on kind of indirect anthropogenic impacts from dams on rivers, but environmental science is heavily focused on what we're doing to the world and how we're basically messing it up. So anthropogenic, that's a term you want to know. That means human impacted. So anthro refers to people, like anthropology, we study people. Anthropogenic impacts from people specifically. Environmental science focuses on that to a large degree because it brings in these sort of more social science topics. Okay. The hierarchy. There's a hierarchy in, I think, every single class that I've ever taught. This hierarchy I like because this is above the organism. A lot of the biology I've been teaching in AMP is down here. And that's cool. It's interesting, but again, it's such a small scale.
Boring.
Sometimes. This is what I love. I love the large scale, not necessarily landscape scale, communities and populations I find fascinating, just seeing how organisms are interacting with each other in a large way. And you don't get that in this lower hierarchy. So hopefully this looks kind of familiar from maybe Gen Bio. You start, well, Gene, I would put atom even below here. So you can break things down into atoms, right? You can break us down into individual atoms at our most basic form. And those all build into these bigger systems. And now we're going to start, we'll talk some organismal ecology and moving up into these interactions. So there's interactions here, but that's all within one organism, right? Now we're going up, we're going into the bigger scale, and I just like that because I can actually see it. I think that's a big part of it. You can't see, well, I guess you could see an organ, but cells and tissues and all of those small things are fascinating, and I've come to appreciate them more, but hopefully you guys find that this is also a really interesting side of biology and ecology. All right, so this is what we're focusing on, organism to biosphere. Heavily focused kind of in this area, kind of right in the middle. Biomes we'll be talking about, that's kind of more the physical side of things, the physical environment. Okay. Questions that we can ask along that hierarchy. So I'm kind of going to define what each of those different parts of ecology is here and what sorts of questions can be asked. So organismal ecology focuses on the individual organism. So it could be physiology, it can be behavior. So we'll talk about behavioral ecology towards the end of the semester. That's kind of out of order of the textbook, but I'm mostly doing that because you guys are going to do presentations on behavioral ecology in lab at the end. So I want to talk about that later, but behavior of individuals. And then how those organisms respond to the physical environment. So we're really not talking about, I guess with behavioral ecology, there's some interaction aspects, but with other organisms. Organismal ecology is how does a polar bear survive in, a polar desert, something like that. Or a fern in a deciduous forest. What kind of factors do they need to actually survive? How much water, how much sun, etc. So that's organismal, kind of the smallest scale of ecology, I would say. Moving up from there, you have populations, and we'll define population ecology. Well, I have it here, groups of one species. So population, we're talking about one species. In this case, it's this beetle. So what is this beetle? What's its population doing over time from 1950 to 2000? And you can see the fluctuation in populations on an annual basis. So what is that population doing? How much is it changing? Why is it changing? And then the distribution as well. Where are they? With climate change, that's a huge question these days. Where are species distribution shifting? Are they shifting north because it's getting warmer? Are they shifting up a mountain? All of those kinds of questions are focused on pretty heavily these days. Population ecology involves a lot of math. So there's a lot of math involved in population ecology. I would say that's one of the more math heavy areas. So what comes next after populations on the hierarchy? If it's multiple species interacting.
Community.
Communities, yeah. Community ecology. If more than one species is interacting, so not just that one beetle, but maybe there's multiple coral species and fish interacting, that's where we deal with community ecology. Gets more complicated, but it also gives kind of a better picture of the whole system, right? If you're just looking at one species, it's interesting and useful in its own right, but in order to get a better picture of the whole system, looking at community ecology is going to give you that. Biodiversity comes up in a large way in community ecology. So looking at how many species there are and how many of each species there are is a huge focus of a lot of community ecology questions. So if we move up from the community, what's next? Something above like an individual.
I don't want to say it because I already answered one.
Anyone else? Yeah, yep. Whoops, I'm sorry. I keep forgetting to advance that. Katie, I apologize. Ecosystem ecology. Ecosystem ecology is now, so we were talking about the organisms with population and community and how they're interacting, mostly focused on living organisms. Ecosystem ecology is now incorporating a lot of the abiotic environment, how energy is transferred, how nutrients are cycled, kind of the whole cycle of birth, death, and back into the next generation. This is where economy of nature comes up again. So energy and matter are considered these common currencies. Energy flows through an ecosystem. Matter in the form of nutrients is mostly recycled. So you reuse nutrients, but energy flows through. Those are kind of the currencies in that economy of nature. Every organism needs energy and they all need nutrients. So that's what they're kind of trading in, I guess is a way to think of it. So that is ecosystem ecology. Landscape ecology. We won't spend a whole lot of time on landscape ecology. I think a lot of you, at least in environmental science, you've probably had a lot of experience with landscape ecology in the form of GIS analysis. If you haven't taken a GIS course, basically that's landscape ecology in a lot of ways. So how landscape is structuring communities and the physical environment. That's what landscape ecology is focused on. Really large scale, you know, a mountain range, or maybe just an individual mountain. Depends on the scale that you're looking at, but that's sort of the focus of landscape ecology. You can ask a lot of questions based on geography. Organisms live in certain areas based on geography to a large extent. We'll talk about patches and how this idea of spatial heterogeneity can affect where organisms are found. And this kind of closely ties in with, and I think I talk about them in the same lecture, conservation ecology and conservation biology. So you want these intact patches of landscape in order to protect certain species that are at risk of extinction. And biogeography is a closely related, I don't know if I'd call it like a subcategory under landscape ecology, but biogeography is focused on kind of large scale distributions of species. So where are species found? And also this incorporates sort of a temporal or time factor as well. Because over geological time, species will change and move. So biogeography tries to incorporate all of that. We're going to breeze right through this because I assume you guys know the scientific method by now, right? You've heard this 18 times, I assume. All right. Scientific method. We're going to talk about how science is done in ecology. It's done very similarly to other areas. There's a few differences, mostly because we're talking pretty large scale here. Scientific method. First step, observation. You can't sit at your desk, I guess you could, depending on your question. You can't really sit at your desk in ecology and figure out a question. You have to go out, make an observation, and develop questions that way. So get outside and ask a question. From there, you develop a hypothesis, test the hypothesis. We're going to run through all of these in lab. So we're going to develop a question together, basically. I'll give you an observation. We're going to develop a question and then a hypothesis. We're going to do some kind of experimental test, not super manipulative, but a little bit of a test. So that's the experiment. And then this is important. I don't know if you've heard this. You support or reject the hypothesis. You don't prove it or disprove it. I guess you could disprove it, but you don't prove it. Support. In your reports, you will say, yes, we supported our hypothesis. You don't prove a hypothesis. Does anyone know why that is? Have you guys heard that before, first off? Yeah, you support it. Okay. You basically haven't tested every single possibility. There's always a possibility out there that the hypothesis could be disproved, right? That's the idea behind supporting a hypothesis and not proving it. And then, yeah, you do the whole thing over again. Make more observations, refine your question, do more experiments. It's an ongoing process. We're going to make it kind of a finite process in lab. We're going to do an experiment. We're going to come up with a conclusion, but then not obviously continue on the same question. Develop conclusions. So at the end, you want to explain. That's the tough part for a lot of people. Explain why you found what you think you found based on essentially the statistics. All right, we'll go over that in lab again. Well, not the scientific method, but we'll be going through all of those steps. Okay, so we can break down ecological experiments into kind of two basic categories. These two categories, some people look down on one while they think the other is better. I think there's benefits to both. There's pros and cons to both of these. So we're going to talk about those. And this kind of goes back to and relates to the historic versus contemporary view of ecology that I talked about. So you have observational experiments. Observational experiments, you're still experimenting, you're testing a hypothesis. It's still hypothesis-based science, but you're not manipulating anything. So you're not actually changing anything. You're just looking at how something changes along an environmental gradient. How many Christmas ferns are there on the south side of a mountain as you go from the top to the bottom? Does the water, the difference in soil moisture, affect how many Christmas ferns there are or other species? You don't change anything. You go out there and you make observations in a scientific way with a hypothesis, but you don't manipulate anything. Manipulative, you do. You actually manipulate something. These are called controlled experiments sometimes. I like manipulative because it describes them a little bit better. You can do it in the field or you can do it in the lab. So it can be really large scale. So we'll talk about experiments that were done in New York where they basically clear cut a forest to see what would happen to the watershed, to the stream. That's manipulation, right? You take a bunch of trees out. That's a huge manipulation. It's really big. Or you can manipulate, I don't know what this is, how much fertilizer there is in some water to see how much algae grows. So it can be really small scale, it can be really big scale, and then kind of in between here. But the take home is you're changing something really specific and seeing what that does to the system. All right, so now we're going to talk about pros and cons of each. You guys probably have an idea of what some pros and cons are. We're going to make a list. If I can, I don't want to totally turn that off, so we'll make a pros and cons list. We'll start here. So for observational experiments, if we can come up with like one pro and one con of each of these, I think it'll give you a good idea as to the benefits and drawbacks of both. So we're going to do observational experiments. We'll have pros and we'll have cons. And then we'll do manipulative over here. Manipulative experiment. What some pros and cons are of that. So think about that for a second. I don't want to throw that on you right away. So if you want to talk about it with someone, that's fine. I'm going to ask you guys to come up with these. And you're probably right. So you may think, I don't know, I haven't done an ecological experiment, but trust your gut. You probably know some pros and cons already. So think about that for a minute and we'll make this list.
It's much more. But good, it's very good. How pros, of course, is destructive or it doesn't impact the wildlife as much. It's look at like a bigger scale.
All right, so who wants to throw out, let's start all the way on the left over here, a pro of an observational experiment. What's a benefit of doing an observational experiment? You don't actually change anything.
Then you can see how things really are in the.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, yeah, like real world results, right? You can see how things are actually changing with all of those environmental variables and see how they would really change in real time. You can write that however you want to. I'm trying to simplify.
It's much less destructive.
It can be less destructive, yeah. Less destructive. Not every manipulative experiment involves clear cutting a watershed. But it can be less destructive and just less interference, right? And that goes back to what's actually happening in the environment. Yes.
Less chance for human error.
Yeah, that's a good, yes, that's perfect. Less chance of human error. If you are manipulating something, maybe we'll just do, yeah, less chance of human error. If you're manipulating something, you might manipulate it incorrectly and get an incorrect answer where you support your hypothesis where you should have rejected it, right? So if you change something and you think you see a difference, maybe you didn't actually set up the experiment correctly, which is complicated, and you have some kind of human error involved and you make the wrong conclusion. That's awesome. Yep. Any other pros of observational? I'm also going to write, how do I simplify this? You can see changes that you would miss otherwise, right? If you have a really narrow focus and you're manipulating just the fertilizer or something in a forest block, you might miss something that's actually having a bigger effect. So sorry, you guys can't see this, but allows you to see factors that may be missed otherwise. And that again goes back to this, what's happening in the real world. We often miss if we're really manipulating something, say in flasks or test tubes in the lab. Factors that have an effect that you didn't predict, maybe. Okay, those are some good pros. I love observational experiments. They're easy. You don't have to figure out exactly what to manipulate. I find them fascinating. But what are some cons? We'll come up with a couple cons here. Yes.
Is that also a con?
Exactly. Yeah, that's great. So you might miss factors. You might not be able to see the detail of the factors, I guess. Miss or see detail of the factors that are having an effect. Might miss, see detail of factors actually having an effect. So yes, you have all of these variables. So basically too many variables, right? That's a good simplification of that. So there are all of these variables in a natural system. If you don't control any of them, you don't really know what's having that effect, right? You're not isolating one variable to see if that has an effect. Any other cons? I mean, I guess they would kind of be the opposite of pros, right? They can be pretty destructive. It's difficult to get enough replication. So we haven't talked about replication yet, but you need replication for statistics. You can't just test one block of forest and say, this is what's happening across all forests that are clear cut in this area. You have to clear cut multiple patches of forest to see what's actually going to happen. So difficult to get replication. In a lab, easy. You just replicate a bunch of flasks, right? It's a lot easier to get, even if it's in the field, you can replicate manipulated experiments a little bit easier. Okay, yeah, that doesn't really apply to clear cut. Okay, over here, manipulative. So it's kind of going to be the same. What are some pros of manipulative experiments? What's the biggest one that you can't really do with an observational?
You have a set control.
Yeah, you can control the variables. And you have a control, we'll talk about controls, probably won't get to it today. But you have really great control over the variables, especially if you're in a lab. Field versus lab is a whole nother topic. It's really hard to control everything in the field, but you can control a lot more if you're manipulating something. You know exactly what you're changing. And if you're only changing one thing and there's an effect, you know that that specific thing that you changed, say fertilizer, is what's having that effect. Any other pros to manipulative? Yep, plenty of replication, a lot easier. Replication's easier. You don't have to, so with replication in observational experiments, you have to go out and find replicates. Right? So if you're studying a river system, you have to go find at least 3 rivers to study. If you're doing a manipulative experiment, you can manipulate the environment enough to make your own replicates, basically. You don't have to just go find it on the earth. You can make them. You make the replicates. All right, how about some cons to manipulative experiments? Human error, yep. It is really hard to create good ecological experiments. If they're very simple, it's not so hard, but there's often things you don't take into account. So even if you set up flasks and you're looking at the growth of algae in a lab, having them under slightly different amounts of light can change the results. Even if you're looking at fertilizer, there could be a variable that you're not really thinking is having an effect you haven't thought about. So it's hard to create experiments that have little to no human error in them. That's why we do statistics also. We assume there's some kind of error and variability. Another con to manipulative?
Can be more destructive.
Yep, can be more destructive. And you're not more destructive. I can't write and talk at the same time. More destructive, and you're not really seeing what's happening as nature would make it happen, right? I'll put not as real world. So by you changing something, say the fertilizer, maybe that wouldn't normally change in nature, but you're changing it and causing that effect. But if it doesn't actually happen in nature, what's the benefit of it, right? So we are mostly going to be doing, we're mostly going to be doing observational experiments in lab, just because they are easier to set up, less destructive, and they can tell you a lot about nature. So we'll use a lot of the observational. These both have, obviously, they have pros and cons to both of them. It depends on the question you're asking. The questions we're gonna ask in lab are mostly gonna require observational experiments. We're not gonna cut down trees. We're not gonna kill a bunch of fish trying to figure out what kind of dissolved oxygen levels they need, et cetera. We're gonna go out and see what's happening in nature. All right, let's stop there. I was gonna get into experimental design, but we'll do that on Thursday. Yeah.